She's telling us to go forward. But it looks like.
Comcast is delayed like 30 seconds.
Ooh, that means.
Yeah, okay.
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 All right, welcome to the Finance Committee meeting for January 30th. Tonight we're going to review our capital in CPC, and we have a member of CPC here tonight. We're going to review and discuss the FY25 budget, and then we'll have member updates, minutes, and schedule our next meeting. So with that, we'll invite Carolyn from the CPC. She has a presentation for us. This makes for good TV.
Absolutely, sure does. Love it.
People are going to be scrolling through, they're going to be like, oh wow, look at these guys.
And it's like a minute delayed, so you guys are going to be really confused.
Good evening. Carol Wheeler from the Community Preservation Committee, and Andrew Samarco is here with me as well. So we'll go through the usual stuff. So this was just a kind of a list of last year's projects that were approved at town meeting. West Lawn Cemetery, we had the preservation consultant for Robinson Road, Hope Memorial Building window restoration, preservation of vital statistics from the clerk's office, the Affordable Housing Trust sweep, the boardwalk at the town forest, and creation of the tennis courts. So you can see the total amount of projects that were requested from CPC was $206,890. Project total was over $1 million, so you can see that between the CPC cash request and the bonded amount that we have for the tennis courts, there's about 50% of the projects come directly from the community preservation account. I have tried so hard to get the balances in CPC. I am still trying. I'm not, so I have two columns here. The first one is my rough calculation of what I think the value was, or will be at the end of fiscal year 24. What's on the right where it says ledger balances is what I got from the finance department. And I know that the buckets are not correct, but the amount is very close. So I need to get with somebody there to kind of find out how they're booking the entries, because I can go through the open finance and find what entries are in there, but I can't it's trying to reconcile it three
The
ways.
sheet that Michelle sent you,
Did
that
she?
bottom section.
Did she send me?
Yeah, she
Robin
sent it to
sent me one
us.
a few weeks ago, and this is where I got that, but I didn't see.
Michelle sent it yesterday morning, I think, to the two of us. So
Okay,
there's a
so-
bottom section to it, and it has the balances, like she has historical at $394,000. Recreation at $975,000. So
Okay.
She has them
good.
here.
All right, I guess I didn't.
there's still some
see that.
entries she hasn't booked, but she said what they were.
Okay,
So
all right, so,
if you didn't get it, let me know, and I'll forward it to you.
okay.
Okay.
So, excuse me, so that ties to the 2985 or something close to that rather than the 25?
It's more to the 2.5.
Or,
Yeah. I may be double counting some because I saw some entries come through, like some revenue that was exact to the amount of some of the projects. And I'm not sure how they're booking the entries, I would have expected it all to come through in the 1% surcharge. And I'm not sure if they're putting it all to cash and then seeing a project and then booking that.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I would like to get with someone there to just, so we can kind of reconcile how we're looking at it.
Yeah.
Because it's
I'm
just,
sure Michelle will be able to help you.
okay, great, we'll talk with her. But that's kind of what we're kind of budgeting for people when they come in. So this is the state match that we got in November, the distribution. It was the lowest it's been since 2017. It came in at 20%. So we got $83,978. The bottom half is just the last 5 years. And you can see it's gone down a lot more than we expected. A lot of that is attributed to high interest rates and low deeds, because a lot of this comes from the registry of deeds, so people weren't buying houses as much as they were. And there was some at the state level. I didn't quite understand the process, but there's something between the legislature they hadn't reconciled, and one of the line items got dropped off, so there wasn't revenue to go around like there was. Like I say, it's the lowest since 2017. The other thing, though, was we had the blended funds of 437, and I don't see that in the figure that's here. If they're basing it only on the 399, that's just the 1% surcharge. So we need to see if that 437 was reported to the state.
Okay.
So
The CPC process with the state is so convoluted. I mean, there's
yeah,
so many things that the accountant has to do, so.
yeah, there are two
And
separate
plus with the
databases.
transition between Alicia and Michelle.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I understand completely how it can happen, but we may just have missed out that. But yeah, it's too bad that it was so low this year, especially after talking it up so much last year.
Yeah.
So much for that. We have not yet voted on our allocations for next year yet. We'll do that at our next meeting. We had a couple key people that weren't able to make our January meeting, so we'll vote the allocations. This is what we did last year. Typically for the 1% surcharge, we've been following this. We may be able to knock the administration down to 1% because we really don't use that for much. And what we did the last 2 years was we took the state match and applied a different set of allocations so we could fund the undesignated bucket a little bit more. This year, where we have more recreation projects, larger ones on the horizon, we may want to, fiddle with the recreation percentage, but we'll talk about that at our next meeting.
Okay.
Next, I think, is just the debt service payments. I took these off one of the budget numbers I saw in one of the files on the website somewhere. So these are approximate, but they look in line for what we have. And then the tennis courts, of course, will come onto this once that project goes forward.
So, in this budget, remember what we said at that meeting? We were putting in the $400,000 from overlay
Mm-hmm.
as part of the payment for the tennis courts.
Yeah,
We would bond the rest,
yeah.
and the town would then make a deposit into CPC for the debt service
Right.
for the tennis courts, and then you would give that money back. So your money would flow in and out, your balances won't dip. Okay? So it's like you're getting money without
Yeah.
getting the money. So you get credit for the deposit going
Right.
in, and the money will come out.
But should we show that as that should show up as a?
It'll show up as a deposit. It'll go to this town
Yeah.
meeting as a deposit to your funds.
Okay.
So it's $125,000 principal payment plus whatever interest we've estimated for the tennis courts. And we also have the 56,000 in there as another deposit. So again, it'll flow in and come out, so your balances won't dip.
Okay,
Okay?
yeah. But we should still show that we're paying that out.
Oh, yeah.
Right on, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And is that 20 years for the, how many years is it for this tennis courts? When will that?
3.
3, oh. All right, we'll add that to our schedule.
And Robin can get you those numbers if
Okay.
you need the exact numbers.
So far, we've got 2 projects that we have approved to recommend to town meeting. Both are open space projects. One is to do with the Cloverdale conservation land. They have phragmites there that they have not been able to do anything with yet, so it's a 3-year project. There's some preparatory work up front that Amy got some grants to do, and then we will fund the treatments for the next, it's a 3-year process. And then another thing that we.
So 3 years at 27 or
Yeah, that number is, well,
annual?
it's 27 for the entire
Oh,
project
okay.
total.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
And then the Land Acquisition and Preservation Support Fund. There are a lot of towns around us that do this. It's similar to the Housing Trust Fund where we give Conservation Commission a chunk of money for them to do upfront work. It's not to purchase any land, but it's the mapping and the surveys. There's in the project is a finite list of items that it can be used for. Once in a, some, like with the Webster property, they need to do an appraisal up front. So this will give them some seed money to be able to do that. I know Acton, I think Acton does it.
I'm surprised that CPA would approve this kind of money because there's no guarantee that you're going to do the project. I can see them reimbursing for it if the project goes forward, but if you do an appraisal, $10,000, $5,000, whatever an appraisal costs, and you decide it's not a good deal, you don't do the project, CPC funds have been used for that project. So
Or
I'm
in
just,
the case of this last parcel,
Yeah.
you pay for an appraisal and all of a sudden we can't even use CPC funds for it.
There is certainly risk associated with using CPA monies for sure. I think that the positive in all this would be that quicker response from us if a parcel did come up. Whether or not it actually came to fruition, that's something that we would worry about for sure, and we would hope would go through if we were investing the money. But you never know with these pieces of land how things are going to go, but at least we'll be in a position to better address them when they pop up.
well, I don't have an issue with the conservation group having a slush fund in effect, right? As long as it's effectively managed. My question is, does this fit CPA funding that kind of a fund? And if it does, it's fine with me, but it just doesn't smell like something that CPA would
Isn't it the
approve of.
admin funds we could use for that?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
in the past, we have paid for different surveys and plans to be put together for different projects. So that would come under a very similar category.
Okay,
But were those already town-owned properties, or these are for purchases?
Previously, I believe for Alumni Field, that was town-owned. Trying to think if there were other ones.
Because I think that's the distinction that Fred's getting at, is if we don't end up buying it, is it now ineligible that we're gonna have problems having used it?
That's a good question. I know that there is precedent of other communities doing this, such as Acton, so it's, and I believe a few others, but it's definitely something that other towns are doing, so I'm fairly certain that it's on the level when it comes to.
Well, other towns are also doing it for projects that weren't town properties and then they got sued.
Well, I think too, because the admin funds that CPA has can be used, like if someone came to us and wanted to buy some land, we could use the admin funds to do surveys if we wanted to make sure, that this was on the up and up or whatever. So it's like having admin funds, but it's specifically to the
Okay, I mean, as
conservation.
long as it's kosher, I'm
Yeah,
I'm
I mean, we
fine.
can check
Yep.
it over again, but
Okay,
we'd seen, like we saw other towns doing that.
okay.
So after you guys fund a project, you submit it to the state and they put their stamp of approval on it? Or how does that really work? Like, who's the oversight for this besides town meeting?
I don't know, does the Attorney General have to approve our?
So DOR is pretty good in terms of
Yeah.
having guidelines of what we can and cannot use the money for. There is certainly a fair amount of gray area when it comes to applying funds to different projects, and we as a committee will apply that framework that we're provided with to each project to determine if it's eligible. But in terms of a state oversight, DOR is kind of sort of that role, but the AG, for instance, doesn't really delve into our projects individually. They'll approve the article and other articles like they do at town meeting, but there's really no overarching.
I think the only time we've been, town council has sometimes come and said, hey, look at this. We had one project, I remember, some with the cemeteries, they came to us and said, you might want to look into this. But we can ask the coalition, the Community Preservation Coalition. They're like the overall, they're the watchdogs. It's, nonprofit group, but we can pass it by them just to double check. Doesn't hurt. We pay them dues, so we do that. So right now, those are the only two that we've heard and are recommending.
Okay.
We're going to have a real busy meeting in February. These are all the projects that we're expecting to come for us. Another phase of the West Lawn gravestone restoration, that's a joint between the Historical Commission and Cemetery Commission. We've been doing that for a number of years. The Historical Commission will also probably ask for some money for the historic markers. Those were put up like I think for 1976, and some of them are just unreadable. And it's a granite post with a thing that says nothing. So we've had that on the docket for a while. So
Not a big tourist attraction.
yeah, I know. I'll go see the blank sign. The Historical Commission has done a couple. It's just that the price has increased so much, like everything. The quarantine station at the end of Trot Road, that one got hit by a car. We had to replace that before the pandemic. And it was $900 for the granite marker, the sign, and installation.
It was a bargain for back then.
Yeah, and now it costs $500 just to get the little sign made. So the commission has a very small budget, so that's why they're going to put it through CPA, which makes sense. Another open space project, I guess. Clean Lakes Committee is, they've got a lot of work that they want to do, and they just weren't ever sure how to fund it. So they're coming in for like $98,000 worth of projects. There are 3 separate ones, one for Long Lake. You see there, $77,000. Mill Pond, they just had boat launch improvements, and I don't know if that's to dig out the boat launch. I don't really know. I just know that it's inaccessible at times. And then Doleful Pond, which is up on the Newtown Hill conservation area. There's a big pond there. There must be water chestnut removal. So we're expecting them to come to us in February.
Mm-hmm.
And then the 2 recreation projects that you guys had sent to us, the basketball resurfacing. And I heard Alicia say that had been cut from 55 to 35,000, so we'll just reflect the 35. And then the new playing field study to either create new fields or reorganize what we have. So the study is 250,000.
And there was some talk at not the last meeting, but the next to last joint meeting that at least one selectman thought that ought to be deferred until we figure out what and where Shaker Lane is, because
Right.
which makes sense to me, and until we know what fields are, it's hard,
Right.
so.
Yeah, so we may not even hear that this
Right, I mean, it might make sense just to, certainly do it, but just not this year.
Yeah.
When Alicia presented to us, it was still at 55,000 for the basketball court, wasn't it? In the cap.
No, it was 35.
She
Was it?
verbally
Okay.
said 35.
Man, I missed writing down a note.
I also think it was it the assessor last night who said that they were going to be working on kind of labeling all the properties and figuring out what's available, that maybe could be fields or other things that, what properties belong to who and kind of cataloging it to see what's out there, so yeah, to your point too, that might still be premature until we do those things.
But it's good maybe just that something could come, maybe
Yeah.
not this year, but in the future,
Right.
just earmark the
Right.
funds for them. so
Yeah, this
that-
one, we maybe build that balance up a little bit. And then
Yeah,
the,
because, sorry, just because eventually we will need to spend a big chunk of change there,
right,
clearly.
right. Yeah. And then the community housing, Bartlett Harvey, who's the Housing Trust rep to CPC, said that he would probably be bringing another request to us. I know this was a big topic last year. They do have more of a budget this year. I'm not sure how that's goes with you guys or not, or.
Have they presented you with a budget yet?
They were supposed to do it in their January meeting, so I'm thinking that they're gonna, Ann, I think, popped in our last meeting, they're gonna come to the February meeting as well.
Yeah, I would not agree to send any money without them presenting the plan to you.
They have $1 million in funds right now that they're sitting on. So I don't see, at least it doesn't get past me to give them another nickel until they present a plan to spend $1 million that they have now. Because once they get it, it's out of the town's control. So at least with you guys, it's in the town's control. So I don't know how the rest of the committee feels.
Yeah.
That's how I feel, personally feel, yeah.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it takes away so much of our flexibility, or your flexibility is
Oh,
coming too,
absolutely.
and
So it's important that we see
What they're
their
spending
budget
on-
for this
yeah.
year and their plan to spend that million, which should be in their budget.
Yeah,
And if they need an additional $500,000, I'd really like to see what kind of projects they're talking about.
yeah, and that's really high because of the 437 in blended funds we gave them last year before that were deposited. So, because I think it was down like 25,000, so I was shocked it was so much, but that was why. But I don't think that was earmarked for anything other than the housing.
And what's the, go ahead.
When I suppose that comes through the planning board,
Yes, those did, yep, there were.
so they earmark it specifically to,
Yeah, because
Housing Trust?
it was, I think, oh gosh, you're gonna make me remember. One of them, I think, was the Jones property. There was money, there was the Cooper property, and one other, but I think it all had to do with like in lieu of payments for
Mhm.
affordable housing. So that would
Okay.
go to the housing.
Okay, that was basically my question, okay. Okay.
So then the only other thing is any other blended funds, excuse me. There was one entry in when I was looking at the open finance module that was the 12 Robinson peer review that came from Cataldo, Joe Cataldo, and we verified it with him that that's what it was. And this was for the consultant. They shared the cost of the consultant with the Historical Commission. So this, I think, the commission used CPA funds for that. So I kind of feel like this should be deposited through CPA, and then we pay it out to the consultant. But it didn't look like it was categorized in that as a CPA deposit.
okay, it's another Michelle question.
Michelle question, okay. And I didn't know, do we have anything else coming? We don't have any other money for us other than the,
I covered everything that we had on our list for new projects. And just wanted to let you know about the town funds going to be deposited in, come right out, so your balances won't be affected by the debt.
Okay.
Which is, hopefully you get a match on the bigger number too.
Yeah, so we'll need to know what that is, right? Because we'll need to vote that as a deposit to CPA. And
Yes.
so we'd like to vote on that at our next meeting, I guess, so if we could,
That's February?
February 21st.
Okay.
Good.
Any other questions for Carolyn while we have her?
No, great. Keep up the good work.
It was
Yeah.
relatively painless, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
And you got cake too.
And we're
And I
okay.
got cake.
One other piece?
No, thank you.
Another piece?
I want another piece, but no, thank you. That's very good, very good.
Fred's getting low.
All right. Given that, where we wound up after last night, we have some sheets here. Pass those down. So these are the changes that I have on my list. And if you guys had anything else that you're keeping track of, let's add it to this, but I can run through these things. We reduced the school department budget by $250,000, which allowed us to decrease the Chapter 70 revenues by $210,000, which was a good thing because those revenues never materialized in the governor's cherry sheet. We have an adjustment to the library salary line at $8,270. The assistant treasurer's salary line of $3,674. And the Neshoba Tech assessment right now is a $60,000 increase. We'll have an exact number Thursday morning from Neshoba. And one of the things that came up last night, but didn't have a number for it, and I put a number to it. I looked it up. EHS Assistant Director's salary right now, she's at a .88, because she's working part-time. She's supposed to be going back to full-time next year. So this is the extra money to bump that salary back up. So it's a total of $41,884 in things we have to adjust. The other things that we came up last night, Patriots Day for the Historical Commission at $10,000. At the very last minute, a grant writer was mentioned.
Before you move on to the grant writer,
Go ahead.
no? Okay. I was talking with some folks who do grant writing, and besides doing just a straight salary, there are some, there's also the option of hiring a grant writer on they write the grant and get a, small,
They get a piece of the action.
so it wouldn't be 78,000.
This is what was said last night.
Well, that's lovely. It's not necessarily true.
I think they said like 2 or 3 things, including grant writer, like it wasn't a,
Sustainability coordinator,
Yeah,
is what they said,
yeah.
yeah. But grant writing is supposed to be the top priority of the person.
Oh, so it's the same position?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So the grant writer will be taking direction from the Board of Selectmen as per what sort of policies to go look to try to secure grant money for? I mean, like, who's going to be in charge?
From what I heard last night, that's as far as I know. Is that at their retreat, they came up with a grant writer that they would like to add. So
A moneymaker.
Saturday, we need to find out more about this
Sure,
position.
okay. Great.
I think
So,
the notion, I think the
at a
notion,
$78,000 salary plus $22,900 in health insurance. There's $110,000 in those extra things. And so we would have a budget adjustment of $152,000 that we would need to find if those things went through.
Right.
So in talking about the Patriots Day piece, discussing it today, I was in town hall today, And we haven't spent the ARPA money, even though 2 million has been assigned to the sewer project and 825 was assigned to our betterment. Basically $3 million is still sitting in an account earning interest, because it hasn't been spent. And it's earning interest, which has to stay with the fund. So we could take some of that interest, we're earning $14,000 a month right now, in interest on that, and pay for the Patriots Day piece out of the ARPA money, or apply the extra ARPA money to a capital project and use the free cash to pay the Patriots Day thing, if it's not eligible for ARPA. But that's up to Ryan to figure that out. But it shouldn't be a budget impact, the 10,000, is what I'm saying. So if we're still in favor of doing that extra stuff that was talked about last night for the Historical Commission for Patriots Day, we have a way to fund it that won't impact the budget. So we should talk about that also. Does anybody else have anything else from all the notes and departments? Anything that you heard them say that you don't think should be there, extra cuts, or anything that was cut that you think should go back?
Well, I was just wondering about the positions that have been approved but not filled that they're working on, like the facilities director and the health agent. I'm just wondering if those are hired during this, what's going to happen with a budget for them for operation? Is that something that will,
So they're in this year's budget.
just for their salaries, but what about for running their?
There's an admin piece in the 25 budget to add extra help for the
Right.
split between the facilities manager and the health department.
So the facilities manager, whatever facilities or departments need repair or maintenance, their budgets will pay for whatever work they want done, or are they gonna be coming forward with saying, I think we need to do this repair at town hall, it's gonna cost
Oh,
this?
those are extra.
Okay,
That's
so that's
extra.
all stuff that's gonna be extras, okay.
And we can expect that to happen big time,
Okay.
probably, if they're doing their jobs.
Yeah,
There's plenty
yeah.
to do.
Right,
Yeah.
okay,
But yes, that's
okay.
above and beyond. But the salary's there, so even if they hire them today,
Yeah,
the salary's there to cover it this year and next.
okay.
I have to say, Steve, I really don't like the notion of not putting anything into the main stabilization fund. It doesn't fit the letter of the policy that we had of, we don't do one-time things, for operating budget, but I think it hits the spirit. We're saving, 100, 170.
Which
whatever.
stabilization?
Just the general
The
stabilization
general,
fund.
okay.
The notion is that we've paid enough in, so this year, don't pay anything, and then next year, we're just stuck again, and that just seems blatantly wrong. It's, put it this way, if we had one of Fred's, bluebirds for that amount, we'd never put it in the operating budget, okay? And just, that's one of our policies. And like I said, it doesn't fit the exact letter of that, but just saying, well, this year, as opposed to all the other years, this year we don't have to put anything in the general stabilization fund, so let's not. And then just next year, we're just going to have to find that in the operating budget. It seems,
Let me stop you there. The stabilization deposit from the policy comes out of the free cash calculation, which is separate from the operating budget. So it's just a component on the free cash calculation that says the first thing we have to do when we spend free cash is to make sure that the stabilization account is 5% of the budget. And that's where the money comes from. We already have more than 5% of the budget in stabilization because it was done heavy during Cheryl's time here as finance director. She was a real advocate for stabilization, so she doubled up in many years what was needed. So there's more than 5% sitting there now.
I get that.
So that free cash component just went to capital stabilization and pension and OPEB. So it just filtered down to those things, nothing to do with the operating budget. So it's not one-time monies going into the operating budget. It's not bluebirds happening that we're putting into the operating budget. It's monies that's staying in the free cash area of the financial policy. So the policy's being followed. It's just what bucket it's going to, that's all.
Okay. I feel
Does that
like,
answer your question?
I didn't, it wasn't a question, it was this, it was a statement. My statement is that I don't think it's prudent. We're, this is, just.
But it's just going to a different stabilization account where we're gonna need the money more than where we need regular stabilization right now. So the 150, think of it going to capital stabilization, because that's where it's winding up going. Which
Can I-
is where we need more money than regular stabilization right now. But go ahead,
You sure?
I'm sure.
Okay, all right, I'll finish the sentence. I think in general, I am unhappy with this budget and that we are looking under every seat cushion to find every little bit, and next year, it's gonna be that much worse, and I don't think that's prudent.
I think you're absolutely right. Next year will be all that much worse. But what affects the operating, what have we done that affects the operating budget that you don't agree with? And to the point that you come up with things that are in the operating budget you don't think belong, come up with the cuts, because we're running out of time. We gotta come up with 150,000 right now, if we agree with those things. And if you wanna do more, we need to find where it's coming from.
Can I ask a quick question?
I'm all open for changes, but we need to come up with solutions and just not these questions.
So Ryan and the finance team came up with, here are our proposed suggestions to balance the budget.
Correct.
Is it wise for us to look at these, I guess, thematically to say, oh, well, you already cut one of these, so maybe we should expand in that area? Like, if people could swallow this, do we dig deeper into these categories, or do we find new categories?
We can do anything we want.
What
So
do you all
if-
typically do?
If you,
Or
if
is
you
there no
don't
typical?
agree with the cuts that he did,
Yeah. No, I understand that. We can push back against
Right.
this and say, oh,
Absolutely.
I absolutely want to keep the.
which we did with
whatever.
the Chapter 70. I mean, that wasn't prudent, and I pushed back on him, and we cut the school budget to pay for it back,
Right.
which is where it should have come from to begin with.
Right. Okay, all right. So are we tonight trying to find $150,000?
I think we need to come up with some consensus with this group before Saturday, so we're
Okay.
not spinning our wheels on Saturday.
We're going to spend them now.
We spin them now,
All
and,
right.
and then we try and convince the selectmen to see our point of view on Saturday, that's all.
Okay.
Well,
Are they still getting a stipend?
No,
No.
Okay.
That's just,
that would have been too easy.
It wasn't much. It's not 152.
Tim's $100 is looking pretty good
I
right now,
know,
too.
right? I told him I was not going to advocate for his budget. He
So
was
it-
on his own.
so, I mean, it seems like it's great that we got 250, we got, a $250,000 out of the school, but the school budget is, essentially half the town budget. And from that point of view, 250 doesn't seem like a huge, oh my God.
I would
Well, and
definitely agree.
So
and
I
they're
could,
still spending the money, right? And they're just spending it
They're
out of.
spending it
yeah.
out of their choice, yes. Which will come back to the operating
Next
budget
year,
the following
yep.
year.
right, so I could,
So just know that if you propose cutting the school budget further,
That's just-
they'll pay out of choice, but they will double down next year to
Be a
say,
bigger gap
here's our
next year."
budget from last year, here's our increases, and oh, by the way, here's the $300,000 that we had to pay out of choice that should be in our operating budget. It'll come back to bite us next year.
right, so
Do
I
we
think,
see what they pay out of their, that doesn't come on the budget, what they pay out of their choice or their other funds? I mean, it's just like the,
They
like,
have not paid very much money out of their choice funds in probably the last 3 years.
I'm not even talking about like what dollar amounts, but like what what items they're choosing to pay for on their own outside. Because to me, and even like that with like the park and rec, the revolving fund, the ambulance fund, I realize they're saving for their receipts, the LTCV, TV, their PEG fund, not seeing like what goes in and out of those, to me, makes it hard to say what I think is justified if I don't know what they're spending it on, you know.
It's a different animal on the school side too, though, because by statute, we can't tell them what they can
Right,
spend.
right, but it can
on,
change
and-
my opinion if I
Yes.
think that they're, you know,
So what
doing
are-
things that are, you know, frivolous.
So I had
And maybe they're
three-
not.
I had 3 meetings with the school department. And at all 3 meetings, I brought up choice and the large balance that was there, and asked them to come up with some type of plan to spend that money down, to come up with a balance that they think they need, whether, say it's 10% of their budget, right? So it's 2.5 mil. They have well over $3 million right now. Come up with a plan to spend down that money, one-time revenues, one-time expenses, which is better than what they had done in the past, paying some salary numbers out of there. So the chair of the school committee heard that message, superintendent heard that message. At the policy meetings that we're going to be having, once we convene that group, one of the things that I know I'm going to bring up is to incorporate some type of policy on the use of those choice funds in our financial policies. I would rather see, instead of them paying the little salaries that they pay out of it sometimes they don't, sometimes they do. And they load up their operating budget with project costs. So if they see that they have appropriation left over, they'll decide to do something that a maintenance project on one of the schools that they've been waiting for. And they flow it through the operating budget. And then the next year, that money's sitting there in their operating budget, they can spend it on something else, because they don't have those projects anymore. I'm advocating that they push that over to their choice funds, spend those down the way they should be, one-time funds, one-time expenses, and come up with realistic budget for us for the operations. Whether that's gonna fly or not, I don't know.
And they handle their own books, so to speak, and set their own financial policies. But what you're saying is, as a town, we should have consistent financial policies across the board.
Especially when they're
don't.
sitting on $3 million, yes.
Yeah.
So,
Well, so,
as an example,
yeah.
so they gave us the, tell you what page it's on. Page,
Education page?
no,
Oh, okay, I'm not
on
gonna
their
look that up.
reserves.
I thought I was in the right place.
Page 29,
Oh, 29.
29,
Never would have guessed it was in.
their reserve, school choice. So at the end of FY '23, $3,007,000. They're estimating '24 that they're gonna get 480 in and spend 567. They're not gonna spend 567 out of those funds in '24, and they're gonna get a little over 480 in from the cherry sheet. So they're gonna still wind up with over $3 million.
So where does the 567 come from?
That's an estimate that the school department gave us.
Just so,
But I can tell you,
Just so it
just by
looks like
seeing,
they're
Look,
not-
but look at their expenses
by
the
seeing
years
what they're
before.
expending
Yeah.
in that,
right, right.
right.
Oh, okay, all right, so that
Seeing
estimate,
what
it's
they've
a little
expended.
disingenuous to say
Yeah.
it's 567 if it's been these piddly little amounts.
Right.
Got it.
So they also gave us a estimate for the receipts for FY '25, which was their estimate for what was gonna come through in the cherry sheet, at 450. Governor's budget came out, it's over 600,000 that they're gonna be getting in school choice. They're saying they're gonna spend 640. Again, the 250's part of it, plus whatever. I don't think they're gonna spend 640. They're gonna wind up with well over $3 million, again, in that pocket.
So, but what's advantageous to hold the money? Who's benefiting from sitting on that kind of money?
As they've said all along, this is their reserves in case they get a special ed case that's excess during the year, and they don't have to come back to the town, they can spend that. And that does happen. There are some big special ed expenses
Yeah,
that they
sure,
do.
sure.
Tyler was on the school
Yeah.
committee, you can vouch for that.
Yep.
But that's more in the vein of 100,000, not
Oh,
not
no,
millions.
It's more than that. I mean,
I
I
mean,
mean, I
it could
remember.
be some
Yeah, we had.
several hundred thousand.
Yeah, I mean,
You're saying for a
But-
student to be out of district in a special
No, this is
residential.
I mean,
Facility,
we had an
right.
in
Yeah.
district. I mean,
Yeah.
we had a single student in district when I was on school committee that was over $500,000, right? Just due to accommodations that had to be physical changes had to be made to the school buildings for these plans, right? So
Yeah.
But now those are
few and far between.
few and far between,
Of course,
but
yeah.
that's why you keep a 10% school choice cushion there.
Okay,
And
yeah.
yes, maybe you have to dip into it, but you have a plan to replenish it after that. Right?
Sure.
That's
That's a financial
Exactly.
policy you'd like to see rather than
exactly,
sitting
thanks,
on
rather
it.
than just sitting and accumulating it for no reason at all.
Yeah, and I'm not even suggesting that there's, inappropriate or things that I wouldn't be in favor of. Like when LCTV shared what they were spending theirs on, we all kind of were like, well, wait, you shouldn't be paying for that out of that. The town should be, and it's something that we want to grow to. So, it could even be things like that, but I don't know how we can give our best recommendations when we don't know all those other pieces.
Couldn't the
But that-
152 come from here? From this line right here that we're talking about, the $3 million line? It ends up being 5% of that amount that they're just sitting on.
No, I mean, we
Well, we do,
we could cut the appropriations
With-
with schools, right? And
with the
then,
schools, say we chose to do that, take 150
Yeah.
off the school budget from the
Right.
town.
Right.
Then, once the town votes, whatever that number is, it's up to the schools to
Oh.
do whatever they want with it.
Okay, all right.
So if they then chose to take money out of this
Yeah,
line or the next circuit breaker line,
sure.
or lay off teachers. I mean, that's within their purview to do. Once all the town basically does is vote a lump sum amount, which is normally in the, what, 23, 4,000 $1 million range now. But that's.
And they get to choose to do what they want with their own guidance,
Right.
got it. And we have, statutorily, it's assigned that way. Okay, all right,
Absolutely.
all right.
Right.
The only time the town has any say in the school budget is at appropriation.
Okay,
is what-
After
right.
that, after we give them the 25 million, they can do whatever they want.
okay.
Right, and the 250 that they've already agreed to cut, that is essentially 1%, of their budget.
Right.
And I don't have the figure for how much Ryan's budget, that he calls the final budget, which annoys me that he calls it the final budget, because it's like, it's final before it even gets to us, but I'll let that go.
Yeah.
I'd be curious what percent outside cuts are. And the thing is, we've talked about informally, we're doing staff additions this year, and, in the business world, if your budget is pretty bad, maybe you don't do as much hiring. And so we've talked about, can we add the police and fire positions that have been requested? And it has seemed informally like, gosh, maybe the fire positions more directly translate into reductions in overtime, so they're less expensive. So we've informally
Right, yeah.
kicked around the notion of, oh my gosh, do we defer hiring a couple of police officers, which is pretty drastic. And then on the school side, they've offered a 1% cut, and one could argue, is that proportionate?
Right, and I think probably it is divided and kept separate because you have potentially people who sit on boards like this who maybe don't have kids in the school anymore, and I think a lot of school committee folks are people who have kids in the system, so it makes total sense to me, policy-wise, why the school committee would be tasked with, you figure it out. And at the same time, it seems like a lot of money. I mean, same thing with the Affordable Housing Trust, or any other thing where there's like a piggy bank of money. It seems to me like the town should be running on, here's what we take in for taxes, and go ahead and spend it all if you want to, but make sure that you're saving for these things. But it should be running, I think, at zero. Like there's not a bunch of surplus sitting around, because it feels like to me, this money was collected through taxation, and it's just sitting quietly just in case. And
Well, it's, you're talking about school choice?
Anything.
It's not our tax money. It's other towns' tax money.
It's other towns' tax money. Okay, but
They're paying us.
Right. Do we pay other people to send our kids?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
So it really is. It's a wash for the most part, or do we
We take in
spend
more.
more?
We take in,
We-
over the last 20 or 30 years,
Yeah.
it has changed. For a while there, we were sending more kids out,
Got it.
and it was a cost center. Now we're bringing more kids in, and so it's a revenue center.
Okay.
But your point is still,
Still
I
valid,
I see your point. It does seem like there are a bunch of the emergency, just-in-case funds, the school, the
Yeah.
trust.
Yep.
I mean, the town itself has 3 or 4, and to your point, at a certain level, how prudent is that, especially in a year like this?
Anyhow,
So-
and I'm certainly not advocating we gut the school's budget. I'm like, education's really important, right? I get that.
What buckets are we talking about here? You just said the town has 3 or 4 buckets.
Well, we have the cap stables. We have the stabilization fund. We have the cap stabilization fund. We have the there's a couple other stabilization funds, aren't there?
But you just advocated in putting more into stabilization. Didn't you?
Yep.
5 minutes ago?
What I was saying, yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny too, Steve, that yesterday when I was talking to you about policies, you said there were no policies that we needed to discuss other than the ranking of
Changing existing policies, I don't believe there are any.
But you just 2 seconds ago said that you wanted.
I want to add something about the schools, yes.
Okay.
But changing our existing policies, I don't think there's any changes to what we currently do.
Okay.
I mean, you could tweak a percentage or so in the free cash calculation, maybe. So it goes to different buckets and,
Okay.
but other than that, I don't think there's any changes that I can see. Maybe you see them differently.
No. It's just when you and I were speaking last night about, I was saying that we shouldn't necessarily just wait for Chase in order to start having the policy committee meet. You said there were no policies to, and maybe I didn't parse your words about add versus edit. I apologize. But
Okay.
What about giant
Do I
salary
think that's going to
increases?
flow? Do I think the school committee is going to allow us to
Giant
put that
salary
in the policy?
increases.
I don't think so.
Here, I'll make a
I'm
point.
gonna
I'll
try
make
it.
a point of one of them if I can find it.
Again, we can't tell them how to spend their money. That's the
yeah,
the
I
thing
get it.
that.
No, we can. They won't listen though.
Well, no,
Exactly, they don't have to
They don't
listen.
have to.
Exactly.
They don't have to.
We can recommend it till we're blue in the face. I've been recommending this back when Elaine was chair. That's how long ago this was, that I've been asking them to do this policy.
No,
And that was 20 years ago.
people hate policy.
I know, but it's gotten us to a point where, at least in my mind, this policy has gotten to us to a point where we're pretty decent as a town financially.
Right. The
We're running
policies
into
is
these
what gave us a AAA
Little
rating.
bumps here,
Sure. Yeah,
You
no,
know,
I
I
mean-
understand that. I don't.
because things are just coming all at once.
Yeah.
And it's hard to manage so much all at once.
And those
We can
policies
do it though,
close
Steve.
some
We
The
can
price
do it.
tag just keeps going up and up and up,
Yeah.
and there's
Yeah.
still only so much money that comes in each year.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but those policies close like the loopholes where the affordable housing ends up, just sitting on all this money that could be used elsewhere. And not to say that the town couldn't support them when they had a project, that they needed more money for. I don't know, it just closes those gaps. I'm leaning to not being in favor of this grant writer. I feel like, I don't think that the time of bringing it up last night was very gracious, and I know all the positions that we're looking at, I realize the grant writer, the argument is going to be that they're going to be able to find us money, and they maybe can in larger impacts than some of the others, but it's like Brian said, the fire people, additional fire positions are to save overtime, the facilities person is to save money on, things, pipes bursting, and, tackle those things. So, I mean, all of these projects, all of these people are for benefit. So I'm not sure that this benefit now coming in at the last minute outweighs some of the other ones that aren't happening. The extra personnel that they want in some of the accounting and those departments, I feel for them because they've lost some tremendous leadership, and they're doing a fabulous job, but they're kind of, I feel like they're drawn very thin. And those kind of mistakes that can happen there can cost you a lot of money if, things don't get done or get overlooked.
Right.
Which
I
is
would
scary.
totally not want to hire a grant writer for $78,000. I would absolutely be fine with hiring a, on spec grant writer to go and say, go find us some grants, and you get 2% of whatever the money is, and call it a day, because it costs us nothing, or costs us next
The only
nothing.
thing I wonder about
Hiring
that,
a
though,
consultant, in other words.
Right.
Yeah. Oh,
but
yeah,
if they're writing
absolutely.
grants for different towns, is there a conflict of interest maybe in when they're going for things? I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
But,
I mean,
but
I
there,
think-
there are grant people who know, none of us are, I think, are grant writers. There are people who are grant writers who would know how to parse that. I think it would make all kinds of sense just to reach out and say, let's find us an on-spec grant writer, do what you can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, right, to make a financial decision around the benefit of a grant writer, I'd want to see like a plan, like are there comparables from other towns on how much money this has brought in, right? I think better defining the job description, right? Is it a grant writer, or like what's the sustainability thing? I mean, I don't know if there's an agenda, right? I mean, I don't know if this is targeted towards
if it were
environmental grants for environmental sustainability.
We might be more tempted
well,
to
I just-
hire.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I was surprised.
Things just
Well, I was surprised when I saw grant writer because when Matthew brought it up, I kind of heard the sustainability part,
Sustainability.
but I didn't know what
I thought there was a third
So
thing too,
the
but
idea
maybe
would
not.
be that this would be someone who would go out and find money for the town through sustainability, potentially, and maybe other things. But it's related to, we're going to need to retrofit this, or we're going to need to improve that, or we're going to need a grant to help us buy another electric vehicle, or whatever
Right.
these sorts
Right.
of things are.
Right.
That's the sense you got. That's the sense I got. Yeah. Okay. So we
Right,
all got the
but
same
like,
sense.
so what are they targeting? Is there a new bucket of federal funding that they're targeting? That I mean, I don't know what the business case is
Yeah,
for ROI on
don't
this,
know
right?
enough about it. and
But I would,
I've always, whenever this has been brought up in the past, I've always said that the consultant route. Schools did it years ago. They hired a consultant to do grant writing, and
How'd that go?
Yeah.
I really don't know because we can't get involved.
right.
Oh,
So
But they only had it for 1 year, I think.
So-
So it must have been specific things they
Maybe
were
not
looking
great
for.
So,
True.
Steve, I guess in the spirit of a suggestion to balance it, I have a question, right? I mean, so we have a $4 million placeholder for Indian Hill with no data whatsoever driving towards that number, right? I mean, it's and I know that's being funded out of capital stabilization, but could we pull back if we made it $100,000 problem, or sorry, if we made this a $52,000 problem by not recommending the grant writer salary and then funded $52,000 less into capital stabilization, does that solve the problem, or
No, because we use
that free cash? Right. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
That's back to Brian.
Yeah. No, that's what I wanted to ask.
I think that sort of as far as we could go tonight would be of the departments we've seen so far, are there any obvious cuts that any of us would make? Because we've got 3 large departments that we're going to be looking at on Saturday. And if we walk in there with $150,000 that we have to find, then we'll say, okay, all the little departments that we've already seen, we don't want to touch anymore, or we do. Then you've got Saturday with those three big departments and the schools. I mean, there's no place else to go.
Well,
Right.
well, I'll just toss this out, just because I like annoying Steve. We could take one of the capital expenses and make that a capital exclusion. We can make the fire engine cap exclusion.
Well, what does that do?
What's
besides
that
hurt
do?
the taxpayer?
Same problem.
What?
What does that do besides hurt the taxpayer?
Aren't we paying for the, isn't the isn't the money for the fire engine coming straight out of the operating budget?
Or fire engine?
The refurbishment of engine one.
It's in the capital plan.
Time for free cash.
It's coming out of the capital free cash calculation piece. Nothing to do with the operating budget.
Right.
What's to do with salaries? Like, let's say that someone was gonna have a 8.79% increase or an 18.31 increase in their salaries. Are the salaries related to steps and to time and that sort of thing? And like,
So right
Essentially.
in this budget, the only thing that's there right now is steps. There's no COLA.
oh, I see, okay, all right.
So everybody who's supposed to get a step is in here for a step
Got
that
it,
they
yeah.
get. The COLA piece is in the budget in a separate line item because the union negotiations are still going on.
And when there's an increase for non-union staff, is that something we're tied to? I mean, do we have to give non-union negotiated staff people the salary numbers that are in here? Or,
The salary numbers that are in here, yes, because the grid
okay,
goes to town meeting to be voted.
okay,
The COLA percentage historically has been what the unions
got it,
get.
all right.
And that's something that goes back to Keith's time here,
Mhm.
because he made sure that town hall staff, because prior to that, there was a number of years where town hall staff got nothing and unions got increases.
I see, okay, okay.
It wasn't very pleasant.
Yeah, no, I understand, yeah, yeah, okay, all right.
So yes, I checked today with Ryan to make sure that the money that is set aside in here for increases for COLA are, in his opinion, enough. And he said yes,
Yeah.
based on what his negotiations are going with now, which I don't know.
Right.
And when did he think they would have final number on the health insurance piece?
Typically, that's like end of February, early March or so. They gave an estimate, but it depends on our history, and I don't know what that's
Yeah.
been.
But really, I mean, the buckets we can look into, right, are, the town operating budget or decreasing the school appropriation, right? I mean, it's not, none of the other lines are really optional, right? As you look at, tech school assessment, debt service obviously was a huge jump this year, which kind of handcuffed us, right? I mean, there's not, other than just kind of
Those are
going
one of
through.
those drivers that
Yeah.
we outlined. I mean, the SOAR is a big piece of this budget. It's
Right.
something that they touted as not being an impact to the taxpayer.
100%.
It certainly is.
Right.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I have trouble solving a problem without knowing the extent of it, right? And I feel like we still have the large town deposits and three unknowns here with NAGOG, Orchard, Conservation, Health, right? So we don't know, right?
So we don't know
I
what
think-
NAGOG
right,
is.
yeah.
Conservation, they want to add a person to, because Amy is retiring next year, and they want to continue at a two-person department. So they're asking for a new person. And then health expenses, I think the health department is looking for $5,000 for extra expenses for their health agent. So the unknown is NAGOG. I heard a rumor.
I also heard a rumor. It's not gonna be cheap.
Yeah.
Yep. Are they coming in on Saturday and talking to us?
They were meeting, what, tomorrow?
They're meeting tomorrow night, so they'll have a number for us on Saturday.
Without knowing ultimately what they're doing with it, I guess I have a hard time visualizing what something now will do that will be beneficial when you don't know what the end game is gonna be.
I mean, they'd have to really explain what they are planning to do with that.
Well, the options are sell it as is at a pretty substantial loss because it's in, pretty bad condition, or, spend a chunk of change to put it in a better condition.
And still sell it at a loss.
Yeah, or get someone to manage it.
Well, I think that's a problem, though.
Which we
No
failed
one
at
seems to want,
already.
no one wants to manage it, right? That's,
Right, well, because it's in such,
As long as there's a deed
Well-
restriction on the parcel, just give it away, because whoever buys it is gonna have to put money into it.
right. I mean, from watching some of those meetings too, I mean, it seems like part of the problem is the economics of the apple industry have kind of fallen off, right? So the orchards are still successful, are doing, all the hay rides and apple cider and all the rest of it, right? I mean, apples themselves just don't make any money anymore. So I think that's probably part of the challenge.
right, and I
But there's so
don't
many
think we know if
rules.
we're, okay.
Good.
I don't know if, I don't think we know if they're gonna come to us and say, hey, we could settle it at a loss at, 200,000. I'm totally hand waving. Or, give us $1 million and we can turn it into something
Yeah.
wonderful. I don't know that they're gonna give us
They're-
those choices.
I think they are
Not-
gonna give you some pretty clear direction. The sense that I got is that they had an assessment or a consultant or someone weighed in and said, here's how it looks to me. And the group is now thinking about how they're gonna put that into a digestible form to explain to the town. I've not seen the report. I've only heard that the report was done. So,
Right, but I mean.
So if it's a substantial number, the only place we could hit would be capital stabilization, which has a balance to it, but then hurts us down the road when it's time for the school roofs in 2 years. We just won't have cash to do it. We'd have to borrow.
Right. I mean, I think if they, total speculation, but if they came to us on Saturday and said, oh my God, we could sell it for 200,000 and wash our hands of it, I think we'd say, thank you so much.
but there's all sorts of agricultural protections on the land
There are.
and,
Yep.
yeah, I mean.
Well, they
it's-
stay with the
it's-
land, right?
they-
When
do.
it's sold.
Absolutely.
So,
Right,
yeah,
right,
that's why
yeah.
you'd sell it at a
Yeah.
loss.
Right, but I mean, at this point, I think we'd be happy to wash our hands of it.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what they propose, right? I mean, they've been in the thick of it for over a year now, trying to look at what's a good thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
So what number do we have in here, Steve, for the sewer next year?
In 25?
Yeah,
That's in the Public Works,
I didn't find it.
page 141.
Page what?
141. 1.7 million.
Right, and 800 of that is ARPA money for the betterment, right?
No, that's separate.
Hmm?
That's separate. It's not part of the operating budget. This is
So-
debt service.
Okay, then the other, what's on Corey's sheet that he sent out
So I was just looking.
yesterday, the day before, it's like 900,000 total. It's like 300,000 for operating and 600,000 for debt.
I'll check whether the 825 is included in there, but I
Right.
tend to think it's not.
But in any event, if it's, I mean, that nut is what's
It's
really,
huge.
it's choking us this year. And, you know, not that we shouldn't do the project or any of that, but it just, the next 2 years anyway, it's really going to strangle the operating budget for the town until the business of the sewer can really kick in. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Two
If we didn't have that nut, we'd be fat, dumb, and happy this year. But we do. I mean, that's, call a spade a spade. That's what's put us behind the 8 ball here, along with some other spending. But that's the biggest increase that we have.
And I
Now,
hope
of
you're
the-
right that it's only a couple of years.
It's scary. It really is, until 550 really comes online. The
At least
town
3
is going to
years,
be on the hook for that. So
So of
that's
the
not going away.
825 that we're paying in a betterment, 200 is coming back to offset this $1.7 million. So net, it's $1.5 million.
Okay. But again, it's $1 million. Okay.
We're also
So,
paying-
you know, we're
$1 million
scrambling to find 150,000, but embedded in that, you've got $1 million that, I mean, we're on the hook for. Everybody voted for it, but I'm not sure that people heard when we've been saying for the last number of years that the next 2, 3, 4 years are going to be really tough. And that's the major reason, because it's a one-time, hopefully, not that will repeat itself 2 or 3 times, and
That's
then
why
it
it
will
wouldn't
begin to
fly
pay for itself.
before you had a purchaser of 550 King Street who was, a development
yeah.
plan, which made it feasible to struggle through these couple of years to get to the other side.
Yep.
Yeah, we're also offsetting some of that with ARPA right now, which is not going to be helping us in future years too, right? Are we using that for? some
We're
of
using it
betterment?
for the betterment.
Betterment, right.
Yeah.
Right, right.
And that
So
may be done
if-
with the betterment.
If we weren't able to use ARPA, you'd have another
Right, another,
$800,000.
yeah,
to-
right. So that's not
So, I
recurring.
mean, that was really a good thing that got blessing to use the ARPA money for the betterment.
betterment.
That was really,
So should we, we're looking to add, a number of positions. And, do we want to look at, reducing the number of positions we're adding?
that's.
Would you say
that's-
reducing what?
The number of positions we're adding.
If we,
We're adding, okay.
just whatever added positions are, just list them.
Right.
We gotta find
Or-
152?
Well,
Or
today,
defund
but
it.
we don't know after Saturday,
Right.
there
Oh,
could
that's
be
true,
more,
'cause
so,
Orchard and the other ones, right?
yeah. I
Right.
think
Right.
you're right, we really can't.
Right, I think the other thing too is, we also looking at the positions that have been in the budget and funded for a number of years that we haven't been able to fill, right? I mean, if they were so critical 2 years ago and we're still in limbo, maybe they weren't so critical, right? We survived.
But
So
they're
what-
already
what
approved by the
positions are
town,
those?
so
I
we can't
understand.
just eliminate those,
Well,
right? I mean,
no,
No, eliminate, just
The
transfer
health
it
agent
over.
we have to do because this
Right,
is our
yeah.
last
Yeah,
year
no, I
in
understand.
Neshoba. And Facilities director's been in the budget for Lord knows how long.
You can't do it, Steve?
I probably could. I have a couple hours.
all right,
But Saturday, we're going to hear
We just solved the problem. You're gonna be the facilities manager for free.
3 firefighters
Yeah.
and
Two
2
police.
police officers on
Right.
Saturday. I've heard the argument for the 3 firefighters, and I tend to agree with it. It'll save a lot more on overtime than what they're showing here because they budgeted incorrectly. The real delta is a couple $100,000 that they're saving on overtime.
Is there a number of police officers that's rationally related to population? Is that the driver to say, oh, we need 14 officers or we need 40 officers? I thought that it was related to whatever your population was.
I'm sure there is something there, and maybe, and the deputy chief will be here on Saturday to present the budget.
One of the arguments has always been that we want to have 3 cruisers on the road 24/7.
Okay.
And I liaise for both those departments. And, what we asked fire was okay, especially with the ambulances, because most of it's ambulance, you know, how often is one ambulance out, and then the other ambulance is out, and then a third call comes in that requires us to go to mutual aid? And turns out it's, you know, it's substantial.
Right, yeah,
Um,
because they
and-
take these long drives up to Leahy and whatnot. Yeah, I've heard
Right,
of
right.
it, yeah.
So a question that I've never really gotten an answer to, and I've been sort of trying to ask for about 15 years is, okay, how often are two cruisers occupied, and then we get a third call in that requires a cruiser? Now, it's complicated because sometimes an officer is, and you know, the cruiser is in court, and so on. It's fine. But a number that I would love to see is, how often is that third cruiser, you know, the one responding to a 911 call? And is there periodicity to that? You know, one could imagine that the times when the third cruiser is needed is always, you know, Fridays or always evenings, or I mean, I don't know enough about police responses, but I suspect that there's some time series periodicity to it. And that would be interesting because, you know, again, do you want to cut, you know, oh, let's cut teachers, oh, well, let's cut police, you know, no, it's sort of a third rail you don't want to touch, but.
Oh, I'll touch that rail, but go on.
Right, but it's, you know, just in the abstract, you know, if we said, you know, at night we can go to 2 cruisers because courts don't happen at night. If we said that, then perhaps the staffing pressure might not be as high. The cruiser replacement schedule might be stretched out a little bit. I think that's, we used to talk about data-driven budgeting. And I don't know that we've done data-driven
Okay,
budgeting
yeah.
on the staffing of our emergency services.
Sure.
But we should.
So
It's more anecdotal.
the emergency
Yeah.
services that go to like 495, there's no mechanism to have the state participate in any of the expense for that? I mean, like, you know, a tree fell, you know, on my fence and blocked the road, and we had to wait for the state to come to cut the tree because we couldn't do it it had to be on a, you know, it was on the state road. I understand that we go to the emergency calls, and if our ambulance transports someone, they're going to get the fee for that, but there's so many things in this area on 495 that are always tying up our police and fire because they're the, you know, the quickest one there, that where we don't get any receipts from. I just didn't know if maybe you knew of anything just from your going to their meetings and
No, I mean, if there's,
Any
you're
kind of
right,
funds
This-
that they-
This intersection is the
Yeah.
Bermuda Triangle.
Exactly.
For, you know, but it would be interesting to see, I mean, to your point, is it driven by population?
I thought it was. I have a vague recollection from a decade ago that, that there was like this.
It's population and topography. We have 2 major highways
Yeah,
coming through,
yes, sir.
and, you know, we had a really miserable accident not too long ago that, I mean, it basically tied up the fire department and the
Yeah.
police department for
Yeah.
hours.
Right,
So, you know, it happens.
right. Well, and, you know, to Jerry's point, if 495 and Route 2 are state roads, the state troopers should be just doing the clover leaf, you know, all day long, waiting for an accident to happen to be the first ones there with the amount of traffic. I mean, why should we be the first
Well,
ones there?
again, you know, they're driving 90 miles an hour north to get coffee and then 90 miles an hour south to get coffee, so I don't know. You see, they're out there, but again, that's, you know, it's one car for
Right.
30 miles or something.
Right, and you can't predict emergencies and accidents, like, I get that, but at the same time, if, as you were saying, if there's data that indicates, yes, we definitely need, I'd love to hear what that is, but
Right.
versus, you know, it's time for 2 more officers, or it's time for another ambulance, right?
So, I'll put you on the spot. You met with the chief. How did he sell 2 officers to you?
It's generally, it's a population-based thing, you know, that, you know, the population is going up. There's this whole, the school resource officer that the school did or didn't ask for, you know, well, 550 coming on, we're gonna have another 1,000 people in town, so of course we're gonna need, you know, it's basically sort of, we're on an escalator and it's just going up. And it would be.
So I can, so the select board this year met with the chief and they instituted a lieutenant. So they took a sergeant, promoted him to lieutenant, took a patrol officer, made him a sergeant. So one of these positions is to backfill that. I can see that.
Yes.
It's out of our control. That's how they went. They granted a lieutenant to have another management level person there. I can see backfilling. The second one, I haven't heard a good reason why yet. So Saturday, that's what I'm going to be pressing on, is why the second officer.
I think they had said before, though, when they're bringing on like an entry-level officer, that they have to send them to the academy, and it takes a while for them to get up to speed to be able to, so I do think part of it is preparing for growth and getting those officers up to speed based on what they've said before, but.
Right. Well, that's the same argument with the fire.
Right, yeah.
I mean, the fire department additions, absolutely good idea, absolutely reduce overtime, and it's a lagging savings because of the fire academy. Absolutely, you know, but I mean, one could imagine saying, okay, you get one more, not two, and schools, you have to take, you know, a proportionate hit as well. And then do with it what you will. I mean, one could imagine doing that.
And it's hard, I think, when you see that there's money sitting there and it's not being used, and you know, the expenses last year were 53,000, and this year there's estimated at, what was it, 567 or what have you. It's hard to have that knowledge and not have the temptation to say, you actually could completely find it right there. Like, here, I'll show you where you can find it, because this is just, it's sitting and waiting. And yes, we could have a child that lives in Littleton who needs the sort of support that is school choice, the kind of money you would go to, but.
Another way of saying that is we have a bunch of rainy day funds. Guess what? It's raining.
Yeah. Right.
But to the point, again, that was made earlier, we're trying not to use one-time funds into the operating budget, yet we're asking the schools to do that.
Sure, yeah. No, right, and a fiscal policy perhaps should apply across the board for everyone, right?
Right.
And
Right.
advocating one thing and saying, you know.
So there's
We're
other
doing it
things.
different.
But you're
there's
saying
other
they're not
things
doing
I
that
think the
now.
schools should be doing to use that money in a more efficient manner than what they're doing now with the operating budget. And
Well,
maybe bring the operating
right.
budget down, because you're shifting one-time expenses over there.
Well, and
But again, we can't tell them.
Well, and
Well, I think when you look at percentage increase, right, so I just ran them, so the 250,000 is not reflected in this
Right,
yet,
so
right?
maybe down like 4.5%.
Right, yeah, so their percentage increase is 4.32% versus
we're
town operating budget north of 5,
5%.
right? Plus we're adding in more town expenses, so.
Who appointed you?
Schools.
Oh, really? I see, right over
Look,
this.
I only made it a year on the
I
school committee,
see.
right? No, so.
That's- make a
That's
fair
why I got
point.
fired by the school department.
I didn't get fired, I quit.
No, but what you're saying is that what they're,
Good job.
what we're asking of them is
Right.
cut lower than.
Than the town is,
Than what the
right,
town is,
so
right?
just-
Yeah, I see that too, yeah.
and going back to
Maybe they should pay for the sewer.
They're already.
and going back to the revolving fund, some of us who've been here 15 years ago, I mean, back then, we were complaining that they were spending too much of their revolving funds, and it's like, oh, that's unsustainable, you can't spend that much or else it'll run dry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and now maybe they've built those funds up and we're saying, oh, you should be spending more. I mean,
Right.
they get yelled at no matter what they do. I'm just saying.
Yep, yep. So did we find the 152 yet? Has that happened yet? Plus the orchard, plus the.
Well, I think you take the
It's gonna have
78,
to come
take the
from
grant
staffing
writer
somewhere.
off
I don't
it.
know. I kind of like the idea of a grant
Unfulfilled
writer.
positions.
Right, but I'm saying it's a contract. Take
Right.
the grant writer as an employee, just take it off the table. If we can find a consultant, fine, but as an employee, take it off the table.
Even if you have to
Yeah.
pay 10% of the grant.
Right, great, okay, so we just saved
So we get
78,000,
we
great.
get- So we save the 78 and we get 90% of whatever grant.
And we don't give them 10%, we give them 2%. No, that's from what I've heard,
I don't know.
from what I've
I
heard.
don't know.
1 or 2%.
So did the select board say, oh, Weston has a grant writer,
No.
and it was 78,000 to pay that person, and that person brought in $780,000? Like, was there a?
You heard what I heard.
Yeah, I just
Well,
turned
Well, because it
something.
can, yeah, it can be a two-edged sword, too. It's not necessarily going to get us a grant for something we're trying to do. It could be a grant for something that we haven't done yet, and now we have to spend more money and do that thing in order to get that grant.
The town dentist.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We can get a
That's-
grant for the chair and the
Exactly.
office.
That's exactly a problem that happens. You go out, you get a grant, now you have a project that needs to be managed by somebody.
Right.
Because when you manage a grant, there's a lot of reporting that needs to be done as far as how you're spending those funds.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going
Which
to
is
do
maybe
it?
why you would
Who's
need
gonna do
a
it?
full-time grant writer.
It's like an MSPA project, right? MSPA project, you just, they kill you in paperwork.
So it's one thing
They
to
only
say,
write the
yeah, we
grants, they don't
can,
manage them.
contract this out, but then you're putting the burden on the current staff to manage the things that you get the grant for.
Then we should hire a grant writer and a grant manager. 2 new positions.
All right, so
Lord will have
2
this.
new
Okay,
positions.
Jen
I
said,
love your style.
That's the opposite. This is opposite what I should be saying, I know.
Counterproductive.
okay.
So, yes, I mean, it's easy to say, let's take it off and hire somebody, but you still need to manage those things, and need to come up with a way to solve that problem. There's not a lot of admin staff in this building. There really isn't.
Okay, well, so if the choice is, and I don't necessarily agree that it's this is the choice, but if the choice is don't hire a grant writer at all or hire an employee, I'd say don't hire the employee. I still think there's the third choice of the consultant, but I absolutely,
I would go for a consultant before I do anything, but just know that there's other consequences to that.
Absolutely, absolutely. But it's sort of like, you know, there are companies or there are folks you can hire that will go to your financial aid forms, for your college financial aid forms, and look for all the grants and stuff like that. And, you know, sometimes that makes all kinds of sense. I'm just saying, let's just take the 78,000. Let's just say that's off the table. This is off the table.
100,000.
100,000.
100,000.
The 78.
78
Well,
plus
22
the
of the
benefits
benefits.
below it.
Oh, well, hell, that's off the table. Yeah, great. I think, okay, consensus, yea, verily consensus on that? All right,
I
fine.
like the grant writer idea, and I think that making the person into a, like a per diem type of thing, I don't know, it seems tacky. It's like hiring someone for 19 hours as a job, you know? I get the fact that we might need to do that. If people really want a grant writer, it could just be someone who says, hey, listen, I'm gonna write a grant, you know.
Well, people really want teachers and people really want police officers,
Right.
so
So if the choice was,
depends on who you're
so
talking to.
this grant
Right, no, I
writer,
totally agree.
put it this way, this
Yeah.
grant writer and benefits, $100,000,
Yep.
right? Police officer and benefits, $100,000.
Yep.
What's the choice?
Well,
Clear.
And
Yeah.
Which one?
Yeah,
Well,
clearly.
right now, right now, the answer is, you get one police officer. It's really, do we want 2 police? We get 2 police and a grant writer. I'd say, I want to make sure I'm doing this right. Yeah. I want to be very careful. Cut the grant writer, and we can afford, of those 3 things, a police officer, perhaps.
well,
Because
and
cutting the one police officer will pay for that 41,000, and then we would have to listen to the Conservation Commission, and how their staffing needs.
and going,
So, yes, that's
For-
certainly an option.
And you certainly, I'm sorry, Tyler, and I certainly see the advantage of keeping it a 2-person department, but these are not ideal times.
So going back to the grant writer, I think, and again, all the departments have come in and pitched the rationale for a position, right? If the select board is interested in introducing something else, I would want it to be a data-driven decision with a plan around why a grant writer. I want to understand, I mean, the town applies for grants already, right? We do safety grants. A lot of our volunteer boards apply for grants, right? I mean,
It's a cushy job, and I'd like to have
no,
it.
I-
So can we just fund it or no?
but I mean, we apply for a lot of grants already, so I want to understand what additional grants we're focusing. Because I mean, if we have people doing it already, what is this replacing? Is it just so they don't have to do it? I mean, like I want to understand the business plan.
Okay, I can certainly reach out to Gary and ask for
Right. I
a
mean,
presentation
yeah,
on
and-
Saturday.
And maybe this is the position we want, but I think there's a position
Well,
at
that's
least that
right,
has
yeah.
to go,
That's not right.
because.
And maybe they have a vision for, hey, we're going to add $100,000. Maybe they've already thought about what they're instructing or thinking they'd have Ryan cut to fund
But
that,
because,
right?
right, one of the things that we need to do, you want this $100,000 position of grant writer, give me $100,000 worth of cuts.
Right.
And as long as they can pick apples. Unbelievable.
So would you do it for 1% commission?
And an apple cake.
1.5%?
I'm not sure.
I-
those
I
apples
have
are
no
any
idea.
good anymore.
Oh.
A 1%. No, 1%.
$1 million grant? No?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, if it were $1 million grant, what's 1% of $1 million? $10,000. It's a lot of money for one human.
For writing a paper?
For what?
For writing a paper?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
No, I
I'm
think
glossing.
it is though. I think you see what. Here's what we're giving money away for. Can we fit our story into that? Maybe.
So one of the things, though, put it this way, even that 1% or whatever you're paying may not be payable out of the grant funds that you're getting. So you have to come up with an appropriation to pay that 1%.
Sure.
And where do you get the money?
Right. I think,
Oh, good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I have to hire someone.
right. Right. And the,
I have my resume here. Please hand it out.
and the problem is, this town is, in many ways, this town is like a toddler where there's now and not now. And it's like, let's do it now. And anytime we say, we'll do it soon, that means never. You know, how many years have we been talking about a grant writer? You know, it's been a
Have
long
we
time.
been?
Yeah, it has bubbled up.
I didn't know that.
And so I would, if we say, as I think we should, not now for the grant writer, what's the way we hold ourselves accountable to do the work so that next year we're in a position to do it?
Well, yeah, or even comparables of, I mean, does 1% of the cities and towns our size have a grant writer, or does 75%, right? I mean, is there any data around it, right?
You want to know what everyone else is doing?
No, I don't. I just want to understand the why of it, right? I mean, again, like
I hope most towns aren't, because that means that it's
Less
an untapped
competition.
More
market.
available, right.
Yeah.
right. I mean,
Yeah, are we
if there's-
losing grants because
that-
we
that-
don't write them
that's-
properly?
Yes, I think that's
Skill
got to be the
set.
case. That's got to be the case.
Yeah, that's what I don't know, right? I mean, I know.
I don't know of any time that we've lost a grant, except for the SAFER grant. And the SAFER grant is based on the need of the community. And a AAA rated community is not really going to get.
Maybe we should
SAFER.
be a single A so we can get
Oh.
that money. Does that balance the budget well?
So let's hire everybody.
Another problem.
We can solve that problem easy.
Can we get a stipend? Is that possible?
No, the idea is that there are grants out there. I mean, yes, we are probably very successful at getting the grants we apply for. The trick, of course, is that there are all the grants that we didn't know that we even could
Right.
apply for.
Right.
It's the money that's left on the table.
Right.
So
Right.
I think so I go back, and it wasn't a rhetorical question. If we're not going to do it now, how do we structurally, this board or select board, because I think they have the same problem, how do we handle I want to do it next time? You know, and how do we remember, and how do we do the work, you know, over the summer or September or whatever, such that because we're terrible at that.
Yeah.
Both of our boards are terrible at that.
But to promise now to put it into next year's budget.
Next year's not gonna happen.
Is not gonna be easy, because next year is gonna be just as
Just as
difficult.
bad.
Exactly,
So we need
exactly,
the
but we
grant
might have
writer
more
now.
data to make the decision. I mean, put it this way, suppose we, I don't know how we even do this, but suppose, now that Ryan has some backup, or, I don't know how you describe it, but now that he's not trying to do two positions, potentially he has, a cycle or two, if we said, hey, Ryan, go figure out what's involved in having a per spec, on spec grant writer, and come back to us in 4 months. And then we have the data. And either he says, yep, it doesn't make sense, or it does make sense. But I think we have to do something like that, or in 9 months we're going to be having the same conversation.
Yep, that's right. Right, so if whoever brought it up, someone from the select board brought it up from their retreat or something, they said they
Mark
heard about
did,
this.
yeah.
What's that?
Mark,
Mark Rombacher did.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. I can call Mark and say, where did that come from? Like, wait, what inspired you to bring that up? And is there like evidence that it's a really good return on one's investment, right? If this person is a shaker of trees, if you have an average or good tree shaker, how much, what's the cost benefit analysis, right?
Yeah.
That's a financial term, right?
Good job.
Thanks.
have him bring his data.
And if it pans out that that's, it is a good return on its investment, I still think there's an unfilled position that can't be filled this year, because I don't see where else
Right,
to make these cuts.
right.
So they're gonna have to want that more than
Mm-hmm.
More than
something
the police
else.
officer.
Or the facilities director, or any of the other jobs that haven't been filled yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're good as a committee on this?
Yep.
Grand writer, if they can,
Absolutely.
if they can.
A cake maker.
Yes.
We could do a cake maker also. Grant writer's
think
not
they
available.
can
I'm
really
gonna need another
justify
sample
it.
before I decide.
Right,
course.
right, but,
No,
right, but just,
Pass it down. And if we can just.
But it
talk up
might
what
be
they
at the
think.
expense of the second police officer.
well, but here's the thing, I think we need to not do the grant writer. I mean, put it this way, I think there's no chance that we get the data that says justifies the grant writer in this budget cycle.
I don't think that.
Right. So I'd say for this cycle, all we're doing is trying to gather some data.
So no job for me. is what you're
Right. So the grant writer is off the table, and I suspect we only get one of the two police officers, and that's how we get back to balance. I don't see an alternative.
Yeah, and if NAGOG comes in with not very much money, and we've got conservation staff and the health expenses, which we don't have a clue as to how much more that's gonna
They
be.
asked for 5,000, I believe.
Oh, okay, so that's changed, but
But
the
a person,
orchard is,
as a conservation person, to replace Amy is not gonna be cheap. Or even if they have the assistant that they're gonna promote to Amy's position and a new assistant, it's still not gonna be
Right.
cheap.
Right. I think we just can't do it. And, if Nagog Hill wants more than $0, we can't give it to them. I don't see
There could be
how.
more asks coming on Saturday too that aren't even on here.
Or the post-Saturday asks.
Right.
It's supposed to be such a.
Right.
So timing
So
wise,
Saturday, highways, I think is fine, that their budget actually went down, so there's nothing we're gonna get out of highway. Fire has the 3 firefighters, which I think we're pretty much in consensus that is
it's
good.
yeah, it's better or a wash.
Police, 2 police officers, I think we can justify 1.
from what I've
Second one's
seen.
kind of up in the air, and he's really gonna have to sell it. This grant writer is,
Yes, grant writer.
I think it's kind of consensus as a no. Unless it's a contract position.
It's a no until we have some more data.
No, I like it. you'd like to speak to that?
I will, because I think something we absolutely should do, and we can't right now. You know, I want a pony. I'm sorry.
The other thing we could do is we could just say, hey, Littleton, if you, as a Littleton resident, secure a grant, we will give you 5% of whatever we'll figure out a way to make an appropriation for 5% of whatever. You go and find $1 million for the town, 50,000. We'll give you 50,000 for you giving us whatever that is, 450,000.
With certain stipulations such that it doesn't incur us hiring a $100,000 position to manage it.
Correct. But I mean, I think that it's going to be related to percentage of, open it to anyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think the slippery slope there a little bit is that we have a lot of people that are doing that already and volunteering, right? So, I mean, I don't know,
You mean grant writing?
Well, we have boards and things that are applying for grants, whether it be for
Right.
conservation or whatever
Right,
else, or
that's
open
true.
space.
Yeah.
Planning does grants all the time.
Yeah.
Planning gets grants.
The real
All
issue
the
is the 900,000
Oh,
to
my
the sewer. If we didn't have that,
If only we had spent years and years and years saying that the sewer was a bad idea.
So if,
Oh, yes, we did.
let me recap, because it's getting
Yeah.
late
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
We can pay for the 41, we can do this. If we cut out everything below that 41, pay for Patriot Day separately through either ARPA or free cash, get rid of the grant writer and the insurance, and only fund one police officer, all this kind of goes away.
Yeah, I think
The
that's.
unknowns.
Except for,
And the after Saturdays. And bluebirds, apparently that's a
Except for
term
the-
of art we also will be
except for the
using at the
bluebirds,
table.
yes.
No, but those are good things.
Oh, bluebirds are good things.
It suddenly, somebody, suddenly a chunk of change comes our way.
Yes.
And we have always said that a bluebird goes to pay down debt or another one-time expense.
Okay.
So bluebirds are wonderful.
Okay. Maybe we should have a bluebird breeder?
That's what the grant writer is.
We're back to the grant writer, Steve.
You're right, right.
So we good? We're all
Yep.
good with this plan for Saturday?
at this point, until we see what the
Yeah.
heck comes over the transit
Right.
from Negor, and how
Right.
Right.
How
I mean,
ardent
that's an
those-
unknown.
people are for that. I mean,
I mean, if
it's been laying fallow for now almost 5 years.
Yep.
It lays fallow for another 15 years.
Finish your sentence. What?
So
Like-
what?
does it get any
So
worse?
what? Okay,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, all right.
So it turns into a forest again, and Indians can walk on it, and all sorts of good things can happen
It's
up
2
there.
years of
The
doing
state's
nothing,
not
gotta
gonna
make
let you
it worth
keep it
less
like
than it
that
is
for
now.
long.
Yeah, it
because
has
of
to
the
be an
deed
active-
restriction. Has to be an active,
Yeah,
yes.
and it has not been active.
Right.
I mean,
And so what happens if we, just curious, so,
The state would take the property.
let them have it.
Good, yeah. That's the best
It
deal
would
of
still have the
all.
same
Right.
Let
limitations
'em
on
take
it,
it.
right?
I believe so, yeah.
Let them take it and let them manage it?
That's my understanding.
Is,
Interesting.
is the,
Yeah.
is the whole,
Matthew and Karen would know better.
is the whole acreage under the,
No.
I believe everything but where the house and the barn are.
Yeah, like the
Or under
little
the
middle
restriction, I
section
think.
is not part of this.
So
The whole
It's not
part
under the
along the
agricultural-
lake is not.
Oh,
but so
And we
there's,
could keep that we could make that not part of any deal they make and keep that for the town for,
but that's, I'm
The
thinking,
trails.
I'm thinking, please tell me that there's a nice football field size chunk that's not have a field.
I don't know enough about the property itself. I know Chuck has walked the property a lot and knows it pretty well. It's a question to ask him.
So Nagog Orchard Working Group should come in with a historical perspective? Would that be helpful for,
Well, I think, who's on it?
Karen
Karen
and
and
Matthew.
Matthew are on it, right?
Yep.
So we should be able to ask them whatever
Okay.
questions on Saturday,
Yeah, yeah.
assuming they're ready to talk about it on Saturday.
And hopefully they say, this is what it would cost to fix, this is what we think we could get if we could sell it.
uh-huh.
At a certain level, that's the only data points I care about.
Sure, yeah. Okay.
But selling it will be a huge emotional issue in town. And I'm personally fine.
There's a lot of people who live around there that
Are attached to that property.
Oh, no, absolutely. I understand that, but
And
I also
The way
have
it
to
was,
pay
not the
for
way it
sewer.
is.
yeah, this is certainly not ideal, no one's saying, no one's gonna go, woo-hoo, we got to sell the orchard. How great is that? It's a loss, understood, but sometimes you have to take the loss.
Yeah.
But we'll
Yeah,
see.
I mean,
Just
there's
make
a-
sure that there's no use for the property for the town first.
No,
Like, as you
absolutely.
mentioned.
Yeah, yeah,
But that's
right.
what you want to hear
Right,
from
Right.
the working group,
Right.
so that you have better data to figure out which side of the question you come down on.
Right.
So, but that's the thing, that's the one that is going to turn this whole thing upside down.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Well, if they come in and ask for $1 million, it's like, it's
Oh,
like,
well,
Well, yeah,
we'll
I
have to
think,
see, and we'll have to see, if this, then that, and if this, then this other thing.
And also how long it can be left idle, because
Right.
we could say, let's leave it alone for 2 years and then revisit, because it can't be worth
Well-
probably less than it's worth now, if it's worth nothing now. But if leaving it vacant for 2 more years is gonna
Yeah.
cause, or inactive for 2 more years is gonna cause the state to take it, then that would be a
Right.
concern.
and I mean, their last meeting, which I watched, yeah, I mean, it was, a lot of what they're talking about wasn't about the viability of bringing it back as an apple orchard, right? It was like, what is the cost to dig up all the trees and do something else, right? I mean, because of the financials of the apples, right? I mean,
But I
so-
thought it was
so
limited what they could
They
actually
can do
do with it.
agricultural, right?
So any
Yeah,
agriculture.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be an apple orchard. So they were talking more
They could
about
hay it.
alternate uses, right? That's, that was one of the things they talked about, right? They had some of the neighbors fired up about fire danger, right? Sorry, that was a terrible.
Wow, all right.
Because I live right there too, right? So that's not at all
Yeah.
intended, right? But I mean,
Yeah.
there's concerns around
Yeah,
neighbors for
there
that, right?
are climactic
Um,
concerns that people have, and
right.
apple trees might not grow in Littleton 10 or 15 or 20 years from now because climate-wise it's too warm.
Yeah.
So that's a piece of all of this as well, is that, the trees can't pick up and go to cooler latitudes. So,
turn it into a cricket field.
what's that? Turn it into a soccer field? It might be-
No, cricket.
No, I mean,
Cricket.
as a neighbor, I love driving through the intersection, seeing
Yeah,
the
it's
trees,
lovely.
right? As a customer, I went to Carlson's to get apple cider and an apple crisp, right? So I think that's the financial and the business case versus
Yeah.
the nostalgic or what's nice for the neighborhood, or kind of
That's
the
right.
differences between,
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah.
All right.
And this is, of course, contemplates we're not going to be, it's civil war a year from now, right? And who knows what's going to happen?
In minutes?
Yeah, do we have any minutes?
Yes, we do.
I didn't bring them.
I,
The ones that need to be done are the 19th of December and the 9th of January.
I have the 8th of January.
Of December.
The 8th of
Oh, the
January.
8th, well, I-
Right. Okay. I reviewed the 8th of January minutes, and they look fine, and I'm sure all of you have as well.
Yes, I have.
Absolutely.
Okay, I move that we, I move that we accept the minutes of January 8th, 2004.
Second?
You, Tyler, you weren't there, so you can't.
I can still.
You can second.
Second? Okay, he can second, but he can't vote.
Right.
Right, okay. So, well, sorry, Steve, you're the chair, I can't say
All
this.
right, we have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I guess I'll abstain.
One abstain.
Right, and I don't have the,
That
I
was really
don't have in front of me the other one.
Same.
Well, we can,
No, I don't.
at least we've done
I'll abstain.
a minute.
All right. So,
So we make sure that Diane gets that copy?
Yep.
Yes.
And what's happening now, because they keep changing how it gets done. Now, when I put it in, I can hit a certain thing and ask to have it email me when they have posted it. And so that's what I have done.
Okay.
oh, cool.
Thank you, thank you.
So that's something new, so.
So our joint meetings that we've been having with the selectmen, we're going to be using their minutes. So we'll get a copy of their minutes once they're ready, and we can vote those minutes. Sue Raymond does their minutes, so.
But we still haven't, the
So,
one in December.
yeah, so,
December 9th?
right. So I make a motion that we approve the minutes of December 19th, 2023.
Is that what we have
I
there?
know that they're close enough.
Have a second?
I'll
Second?
second it.
Sure.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
December 19th is done.
Oh, that's when we were at LPD. That's right.
Right.
Okay? Anything else anybody has? Member update, I do have something, so we've been meeting with the Shaker Lane Building Committee, and that project is moving along. We've hired the OPM, and it's into the next phase. They have a plan that they've put out, a timeline that meets what all the goals from MSBA, because it's very structured, how MSBA does things. And if we follow that schedule and we stay on that schedule, not this fall, but next fall town meeting, we will be going for funding for the, whatever happens with Shaker Lane, whether it's renovation or new.
When will you know if it's going to be renovation or new building?
That we don't
Sometime
know.
between now and then.
Sometime between now and then.
Okay.
So that would be,
If it's,
So it's fall of
After the
25.
feasibility study comes
okay.
back.
But you could, in theory,
FY
know
26.
before that, it's got to be a tear
Yes,
down.
right.
Yes.
Okay.
when they're,
late FY
assuming that it's not just renovate in place, are they looking at different locations?
They haven't gone to that point yet. They have to make
Will
the
they?
decision, yes.
Okay.
To make the decision, renovate or
The
new.
orchard.
Once they say new, then they have to go out and find a location.
Okay,
Yes.
and you're part of the working group that would,
Yes.
and so, because we've talked about, gosh, wouldn't it be nifty if that was over on the campus by, Russell?
And I have mentioned that to both the chair of the school committee and to the superintendent. Got mixed reactions from them. So I will continue to keep that growing.
Whereabouts are you thinking?
Well, okay. So a couple, there have been just discussions, wouldn't it be, wouldn't it be cool to have it, either next to the high school and have a campus there, and it's like, oh, okay, maybe, or have it over by Russell and the middle school and have a campus there. That would probably encroach on a field, but then, then what do you do with the old Shaker Lane? I'd ask the question, what about the field behind Shaker Lane? How come we never use that? The answer we got, or what we heard, was that it's too wet, and it's like, well, is that an insurmountable? I mean, I'm not a hydrologist, but though I do know some.
Well-
Is that not something that could be mitigated? I mean, who knows?
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
I think that was
for
part of the intent of
cost.
the $250,000 was to look at those fields specifically, right? I mean, see what they could do there.
I don't know if it's specifically
Yeah.
those fields, but
Yeah, and she talked about that,
fields
so.
in general, yeah. So, okay, that's all I had. We're done? Good?
I just
Any other
had
else?
the Light and Water Department's meeting on March 6th, and the commissioners are going to vote to approve their budget, so Nick said he could come in to present to us after that date if you wanted him to.
Okay. I know they approved the SOAR budget at their last meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they gave us a copy of that, so.
And they're one of the departments that I don't think is ever televised, their meetings. And
Correct.
I would love for some citizen to do a citizen's petition to ask the select board to make all such boards have to have their meetings televised.
Why?
Because transparency is good.
Oh, the transparency argument, the one that everyone puts out there, and then, no, I'm not criticizing you, I'm just saying that transparency is sort of like, you can't be elected to national public office unless you espouse a faith in some higher being. Like, if you say you're an atheist, you're never getting elected in the US. If you say that you're not for transparency, you're never getting elected in Wilton.
Right. I do think, anyway, I
Are we
want to
done
get
with
it.
the meeting? We can talk about
Yeah,
this.
yeah, yes.
Motion to adjourn?
We have a motion to adjourn, do I have a second?
So quick on
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Yes. Aye.
Thank you.
that. All right.